Okay, go ahead.
Um, I don't have a garden, but not so much like a out yard garden, but I do have some like habanero peppers and jalapeno peppers and bell peppers in a pot. Can
Okay.
I can I just use that? I'm sure I can.
Well, the potting soil is going to be a little bit different.
Well, I
There,
mixed with a whole bunch of stuff, so it's not. It's mine is kind of yeah. I guess you say it would be different from the land
yeah,
soil. I see what you're saying.
because yeah, if you can just
Okay,
like
no
get some
problem.
from a driveway or
I just go to
like,
the backyard and just I'll send my husband to the backyard rather than get me some soil. Yeah.
okay, yeah, real soil works for this because the
Real
media
soil.
is different. Real soil.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Oh, you want it from the ground, not from our garden bed?
Or from your garden beds, yeah, soil from the ground. I mean, if it's a raised bed, it has media in it, which has no soil. So you need you to bring in soil, like you were taking a soil test from the ground.
Okay, so I'm confused. No garden beds, but I have 8 of them. So which one?
What kind of, what components of soil do you have in your garden bed?
In
That's
3 of them, I have cow manure and rabbit poop and soil. And
Okay.
then the other 3 is just rabbit poop and soil and compost.
I would use the one that's got a little bit of soil in it, because we're looking at the components of soil. Either that or dig right next to your bed, just in your yard somewhere, and just get a cup of soil.
Potting media is not soil.
Potting media is not soil. Manure is not soil.
Okay, I just cleared that up because.
Soil and dirt are used interchangeably and they're not the same.
Okay,
Soil is the healthy stuff. Dirt is what you have left over after they scraped away everything to build something more you go expose it to.
so you want soil from your home.
And if
Yeah,
you want
soil
to be,
from the
and if
ground.
you want to be real fancy, you can, if you have the space, get it from 2 spots in your garden and your yard. If you want to be fancy, because that way you can actually compare the two. Because each of your areas should be very different. Most of Tennessee is red clay and limestone, because that's what we were ocean. But anyway.
Okay, clear on the assignment? I will send an update, but yeah, it needs to be soil, not a soulless mix. So, all right. Well, tonight we have with us Stephen Smith, Dr. Stephen Smith. Yay! I've known Stephen since he was about this tall. So, but we're glad to have Stephen with us tonight to talk about botany and plant physiology, and we'll do a little bit of hands-on, a little bit demonstration for you later. And so, Stephen, welcome. I'll let you tell anything else you want to about yourself. He's seed saver, breeder.
I do a lot of things. So I'm gonna have to not move, which for me is very hard to do. So I'm also a teacher. I teach in Hoptown. I teach English, science, and advanced placement courses. So that's what I've been doing all day. We came straight from the school. My dad teaches there too. I'm a published author. I got about 7 books coming out next year. When my agent gets done with everything. I will also, which Carla does not know this, she's about to, I am working on a seed saving book. My agent desired the idea of one because I've been doing this my whole life, and a lot of the stuff I know has not been published anywhere, because it's personal experience and observation. So when that is done, I will send Carla an email and she can spread it around. I did this I say I did this professionally. I did for 4 years. I lived in Pennsylvania. I ran a nonprofit teaching people how to grow their own food and turn it into food. I was the manager of a seed collection up there that had about 3,000 food plants from all over the world. So my knowledge is vast. I was originally a botany major before going into education and plant breeding, plant genetics. Eventually I'll do one in entomology, but that's when I have time. So my goal for you all is to not overwhelm you, because that's what my students were the entire day today. So why do we care about botany and plants in general? So this is your common yellow zucchini. Basic botany will help you all, and you all help others through the extension here and master gardeners be able to help people understand why their squash is not pollinated. if you do not have a native population of squash bees, which have existed since the birth of the cucurbita genus itself, which is what squash fall in, you may have to do it by hand. I grow anywhere from 3 to 15 different varieties of squash every year, and I hand pollinate all of them. I have the wild ancestors to these zucchinis, which I let the native squash bees pollinate, but everything else I do by hand. So this is important. With a pepper plant, this actually happened to me a few weeks ago. I had some very late Brazilian peppers that I got put in the ground. And this one here is burnt because it was not hardened off. You need to harden off with seedlings before you put them out in the real world because they can't handle it. Much like I was being an adult, but here we are. So stuff like this is important because gardeners, this will happen pretty much all the time. Knowing what grass grows here and what grass doesn't. That's also a problem with yards and everything. If you were outside today, it's about 101. And most plants will shut down about 90 degrees. They will just stop growing because it's just too hot. And not everything is meant to grow here in Tennessee. I learned that the hard way. And then you get things like this lettuce that is already bolting. You won't leaf lettuce or head lettuce, but you already get flowers because the plants read daily through their leaves. One most of us have probably seen, blossom end rot, usually from a lack of nutrients and everything in your tomatoes. My tomatoes succumbed to a horde of hornets this year, but and then we also need to understand the connection between plants and insects. Now, flowering plants, which we will get into, they are relatively young on the scale of geologic time. As a science teacher, I teach this all the time, but we did not have bees for a while. We did not have beetles. We didn't have mosquitoes. Thank God. We didn't have flies or anything, but beetles became the first pollinators for plants on Earth. Because everything else reproduced by spores and asexually. So we're going to start with plants and the anatomy and function. Some of this, if we can remember way back to biology, might be a refresher. So we have the structure, photosynthesis, growth, metabolism, inheritance, and reproduction. So in a plant cell, they are different than animal cells. Why? We are not green, for one, because we don't have chloroplast. Well, if you do, you might want to hide, but plant cells, they have a vacuole, cell wall, cell membrane, mitochondria, nucleus, cytoplasm, the chloroplast, which is what makes plants green. That's what nitrogen is important for. Nitrogen is the element that controls chloroplast color. And then other vacuoles. Unless you are wanting to be a plant, like a biologist or something, you all may not necessarily need to understand all of that. But with this, we're going to focus on flowering plants because as gardeners, this is what we all encounter the most. This means vascular plants. They have seeds, not spores. They have reproductive structures and they have covered seeds. So this is your typical plant. We have some up here, which I will get into. Flowers, leaves, roots. I think we all have seen this. I don't want to get too into this picture. So your roots and shoots. Roots are anchors. They are what should keep your plant from blowing over. Now, if you have lived here long enough in Tennessee, you realize our weather is bipolar most days. So roots ideally anchor, they absorb water and nutrients, and sometimes they store excess food. Your shoots are what support your plant. They are photosynthesis and they are used for flowering and reproduction purposes. So we're going to do a brief pop quiz. Actually, I will skip this. Maybe. So what do we think a carrot is? Root. Now, carrots were never orange. They were actually purple. originally. For some reason, we wanted them orange. I don't understand how we did this necessarily, but true wild carrots are purple and red. They do have black carrots now. They have purple carrots, yellow carrots, white carrots. Carrot breeding has come a long way. Now, you have seen carrots all around Tennessee because we have a plant here called Queen Anne's lace. The big white umbels of flowers with a red one in the center. That is wild carrot. That is true wild carrot. We just call it a fancy name because somebody thought Queen Anne pricked her finger. So what do we think the stolons on a strawberry plant are? Stem, root, leaf, what do we think? They are a compressed modified stem. You all have probably seen these when they touch soil, they root. A lot of plants reproduce this way too. So what do we think the white parts of this dogwood flower are?
The white part is the
You could say, yeah, they're a modified leaf. They're called a bract. The actual flowers are the little things in the very center. They're white because they attract pollinators. That is what their main purpose is. And then what do we think a eggplant is? A fruit, obviously, a fruit.
all these are fruits. We didn't find out what true vegetables are.
And then what do we think this purple cauliflower is? Do we think it's like a flower, a stem, a leaf?
It comes in a seed.
Flowers.
So that's a flower.
So these roots are off of a legume. Now, legumes include anything from green beans to black-eyed peas, to peanuts, mimosa trees, anything like that. Redbud trees that we have here, they are a legume. They fix their own nitrogen. These little puffy little orbs that's on these roots, that's the house of the bacteria that fixes the nitrogen for the plant. More than likely, your soil is depleted of these, so you should buy a supplemental one off of some garden centers online. And you need to soak your green beans or whatever legume you're planting because they will die if they don't have this. They evolve to have this relationship. So this is kohlrabi. We eat it as an enlarged stem. Kohlrabi, broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, all of those came from a single wild ancestor, which I actually have, from off the coast of England. It was nothing but leaf. It looked like turnip greens, and we took it and domesticated into all these different forms. So again, broccoli we know is a part of the flower. Now, what do we think potatoes are? They are a stem. They are not roots. They are modified stems. So if you've dug potatoes, you see they have an actual root system. These are just modified stems that happen to store the food and everything for the plant. That's what their actual purpose is. We just decided a few thousand years ago to start munching on them because we thought they made good chips originally. So this is like the dogwood. We all probably have seen poinsettias here. I say poinsettia because that's how I was raised, but it's actually poinsettia. It's named after a Mexican botanist originally. But the pretty parts that we consider flowers are not the flowers. They're like a dogwood flower. They're a bract. They are modifications of a leaf in order to attract pollinators. They actually have tiny flowers. Poinsettias are also poisonous, so do not get the sap on you because it will burn you. They are very poisonous, yes. A lot of plants we have as houseplants are actually toxic and can kill you. If you eat them, obviously. But teaching children, that's all mine want to do is eat something. I'm like natural selection, I guess. I don't know at that point. So what do we think ginger rhizomes are? Modified stem, a rhizome.
That makes sense.
That is what you're eating. So we are going to go over stems, roots, leaves, and flowers. We're going to start with stems. So the main part of these is you have an apical and axillary stem. You have dicots and monocots, you have herbaceous and woody, and you have nodes and internodes. And we are going to look at each of these. So with a meristem, you have cell division and cell elongation. This is the deeper biology part, but all the tissues in a plant originate from this meristem originally. It is the primary growing point for a plant. A shoot, whatever it may be. Roots have one of these too. That's how they keep growing. If you all want to write stuff down, just tell me to go slower. I talk relatively quickly. So, because I'm used to having to keep kids engaged for 7 seconds at a time. So apical and axillary. So every single growing bud on a plant ends in a bud, which is called a terminal bud or an apical bud. You will sometimes hear that called apical meristem. So your apical buds are in the leaf where the leaves connect to the stem. They are in leaf axils. Now your apical is your actual growing shoot and or stem.
Pitch that out of it.
So you can kind of see here in this picture, I'm not going to move too far, but where the arrow is, that's your main growing stem on a tomato. Where the flower stem is coming out of, that would be like an axillary, because that's where you get suckers from on tomatoes. Which is what this picture shows. This is how you get suckers off of tomatoes. They are axillary growth points. They come out of the leaves or out of where the leaves connect to the stem. So plants have what we call apical dominance. This is how when you prune a tree or something, you can shape it and it'll grow in the shape, but you have to maintain it because nature doesn't like what we humans do for the most part. But this is effective for pruning and pinching because many of you have probably heard, especially with tomatoes, if you pinch it, it'll bush out or it'll sucker out or something like that. Pruning kind of operates the same way. All of this is controlled by hormones in the plant. So auxins are what they're usually called. They regulate what grows, when it grows, how they grow, where they grow, and it just depends on that of how much you will have to manage your plant. So with monocots, which are most of your grasses, this is when you have to mow your grass, which if you have a yard now, it's probably dead because it's been cooked. So nodes and internodes. So nodes is where your leaves attach to the stem, leaf axils again, and internode is the stem space in between each node. If you are trying to identify a plant, this can be quite important because I've spent, I'm 27, so we'll say 22 years or 23 years of my life learning plants and everything by hands-on and identifying them. And it's not easy because some plants look identical. So with nodes and internodes, you do have dwarfs. They are very responsive to the environment. That's how plants grow. When you are selecting transplants to grow, to buy at the store, please don't buy the weak ones. Guess what's going to happen to them? They're going to die because you want the strongest ones. If you sow your own seed like I do and you transplant and you have a set of plants, they're like, even if it's 3 or 4 that look absolutely great, you need to select and use those. Throw the others away because they are not what you want to save seed from anyway. You want the strongest plants that you have to survive, especially with the way our climate has shifted. So what is in a stem? So you have 2 main components of this called a xylem and a phloem. These are part of the vascular tissues. In your dicots, you have a xylem and phloem in a ring with a layer of cambium in between. And then in monocots, they're in small bundles. They're pithy. That's, again, most of your grasses. Dicots are generally everything else. So your xylem is what transports water and minerals. If you all have ever done this experiment with either leaves or carnations or roses, this is the process that can change the color because the xylem is what connects all of this in the plant. The movement depends on the properties of the water. and leaf transpiration provides the pull. That's what drives most of these processes. So your phloem is what transports your sugars, your amino acids, and the hormones that control plant growth. Again, most of this, unless you're getting into the real nitty gritty, this is just a basic overview of this. Sometimes you do see a lot of the pathogens, a lot of the diseases and insects that we deal with as gardeners. They attack these parts of the plants because that's where the nutrients, the water, and the sugars are. That's what they do. So like in this lettuce plant, something has attacked the phloem, so it's distorted the way the plant has grown and the leaves. This is most likely from sugars because it looks like the plant has almost been starved. And the lack of hormones too. So this is kind of a cross section of what I was talking about. So your dicots and monocots. Monocots have the bundles and dicots have that ring. So think of a tree if you want to think of a dicot. Now this is where my temper kind of goes up because plant classification drives me mad. They keep changing everything. And I know we have very good genetic tools, but it drives me to no nonsense given the way that they decide to reclassify plants all the time. Mainly because we learn more and more about them, which is great, but asters, if you all know what asters are, our native species we have in Tennessee has now been split into about 10 different genres, 10 different options of genus that they could be placed into. But I'll get into that when we get there. So non-vascular, they have no vessels, no roots, no stems, no leaves. These are like your mosses and liverworts. Keep in mind, we've had moss and liverworts on this planet for millions of years. They used to be the size of trees. They were some of the first dominant life forms that our planet saw, along with gigantic mushrooms. Vascular are the ones that we know and that we're more focused on. They have the vessels to transport food and water, the phloem and xylem, and they have roots, stems, and leaves, or they should. Now, these vascular plants are broken down into gymnosperms and angiosperms. This is something I would write down. Gymnosperms are very old. They are known as the cone-bearing plants. Your ginkgos, most of your evergreens, your cedars, your pine trees, stuff like that, they fall in the gymnosperm category. These are some of the first plants that ever lived on our planet. There was no flowering plants for the first few million years of life on our planet. These dominated, and that's why we didn't have a lot of insects. I mean, we had dragonflies the size of your car, but that's just the dragonflies. Needle-like leaves, and again, most of them stay green year-round. You have ones like the bald cypress that are deciduous, but most of these stay green year-round. We usually see these. Now, that doesn't mean your magnolias and your hollies, they are angiosperms because they have actual flowers. But we all should at least be familiar with most gymnosperms.
Gymnosperms.
And they're wind pollinated.
You done lost me. Well, what happened to roots and stems? Hello?
We're kind of just moving on.
Oh.
Did it glitch out on you? It may have. So your angiosperms are what they generally call flowering plants. The seeds are enclosed in some kind of fruit, and they are generally pollinated by birds and bees. Does anybody happen to know what one of the first flowering plants our planet ever had was? Magnolia. They are one of the oldest flowering, if not the oldest flowering plant that we have, that we know of. There's a fossil record of angiosperms, but at the same time, we don't know much about them because they just suddenly appeared. After gymnosperms were almost wiped out, magnolia started, and then flowering plants evolved because bees, butterflies, beetles, and everything, they started to evolve with angiosperms. They have a finite growing season, and these are your common things like grasses, tulips, oaks, dandelions. We all love dandelions. They actually make a delicious salad. They are edible. They also clean out your liver, so keep that in mind. So angiosperms are divided into monocots and dicots. So I don't know why this is like this, but it is. So your monocot, we're gonna kind of go over this separate, but flower petals usually multiples of 3, vascular tissue scattered out, smooth, narrow leaves, parallel veins, and a fibrous root system. I don't know that this will let me move it. So I should say 1 seed leaf. That's what that should say, not Leah. 1 seed leaf, which is called a cotyledon. It has fibrous roots, flowers in parts of 3, and vascular tissue scattered. Mono means 1. So that, again, only 1 seed leaf, only 1 cotyledon on these. I'm gonna do what I do with my kids and look around and see who's still writing. Now I can stand up here and talk about this relatively quickly because I've done this most of my life, and Carla has graciously had me do this for the last ever how many years. So I'm used to doing it, but I know it's overwhelming because it's hard to sit down and have all this stuff thrown at you. The presentation that we had to give our kids was 250 slides. So imagine how they felt. That was not my choice, but yes, ma'am. To be honest, I don't really use the book. Natalie, who is part of the University of Tennessee, she's one of the greatest people there. She made this presentation, so it's probably based off of this, but if you want to hand me your book, I can.
Well, it's kind of like some of it is in there, and you gotta kind of go back and forth, because you go with like the roots and then like the leaves, and I'm on a page about roots and then it's got the poem side.
Well, some of this, the way that she and because I modified her presentation here, I changed it a little bit to kind of go through it differently.
Yeah, I'll back you up. There's even a lot of times the presentations don't completely follow what is in the book, the information that's in there, but it's not gonna follow it by paragraph, because you have the added educational material on the slide.
Yeah, so some of this is not even in here. Probably, which is it is a headache. I definitely agree. But it looks like a lot of this, they are probably assuming that you all already have that background knowledge. That's a lot of books like this, that's what they do. So Carly will have access. She'll have this presentation and she can share it with all of you. But I don't really follow the book. These are great resources, obviously, but there's a lot of things that books leave out. As a teacher, I know that firsthand. Because we write our own history most of the time. It is very one-sided. So if some of this is foreign to you, try to take notes as the best of your ability. Carlo, again, she'll have this presentation, so you all will have access to it. When I go through and do this, it is what I have modified from teaching this for the last decade or so that I've done this. And a lot of this is from my own personal experience too. So what you find in a book is not going to be the same thing. Most people that write books have never touched a plant before. So also keep that in mind. They've never gardened before. Welcome to education. So I'm hoping this one is not cut off. I'm not sure why it's wanting to do this. So a dicot has 2 cotyledons. If you've ever grown beans from seed, you've seen this. The 2 little things that pop up when they first sprout. Their veins are in a network. They have primarily what we call tap roots, which we will look at. flowers are in parts of 4 or 5, and you have those rings of vascular tissues.
It looks like the sound is gone.
Oh no, I'm letting everybody write. They're taking notes.
Sorry,
It's okay, you're good, you're good.
it was too quiet.
I know, I know, I appreciate it. So how else are plants classified? This is in your book because I just seen it. Most of us should probably have some vague idea of this. Their life cycle is something very important to know as a gardener. Annuals, biennials, and perennials. Now, with me, I have subsections of all of these. Who in here has grown hollyhocks? Who knows what a hollyhock is at least? So I consider them a biperennial because sometimes they come back, most of the time they don't. They take 2 years to flower, which is the true definition of a biennial, but they also can come back each year. It just depends on the winter we have. I had dahlias that I planted last year that came back from roots, from the tubers, because we were so warm last year. Annuals, they germinate, grow, and complete their life cycle in 1 season. So this is most of the stuff we grow. Tomatoes, corn, radishes, many wildflowers. Biennials, again, they take 2 years. They have to overwinter. That cold is what triggers their flower. They will not do it until they have had it. This is most of your brassicas. So cabbage, cauliflower, broccoli, kale, all of that. Generally, those kind of things have to have that cold in order to trigger their blooming, in order for you, if you want to save seed. Sometimes if you plant it, it will bloom the same year. But most cabbages, you have to plant it in like the fall and let it overwinter, and it'll bloom in the spring. But that's not always the case. There are exceptions. Yeah, 2 seasons. Yeah, 2 seasons. Yeah. So think of years as seasons. Not necessarily 2 full years. When I lived in Pennsylvania, we had a really rare pear tree. When you would graft them, it took 25 years for that one to bloom. And I'm like, well, that's too much for me. I'm too impatient for that. But some plants are like that. Most plants, they're not that picky. With perennials, they germinate, grow, and die, and come back multiple years. Usually 3 or more. These are like your boxwoods, most bee balms, black-eyed Susans, depending on what kind you have, stuff like that. They come back every year. They're reliable. Usually. Yes, yeah. Yeah, literally, yeah. Perennial, she's right. Perennial, you all can think of as true years. They don't just die and that's the end. Although lately that's what's been happening to most that I've brought. So.
That's the hostas. I don't think you can get in the hostas.
Not usually. Hostas and daylilies. That's usually what it is. So one of the most famous monocots is corn. This is a dicot stem. We've already kind of looked at this. I'm not going to spend an eternity on this. So herbaceous and woody. This comes down to secondary growth. It is present in dicots. You don't really see this in monocots. Now bamboo, that's different. Bamboo is actually a grass. So herbaceous and woody, they have a vascular cambium or a cork cambium. This is when like those bundles connect and everything. I'll go back if we want to write this down. More than likely, it would have to be, I mean, it would have to be like lemongrass if they were growing it. That doesn't grow wild here though.
Taking breath, it looks like maybe taking some type of. I don't know.
It could be. Most of the time, what I tell people is, which you probably know, don't go eating something that you don't know what it is. Mushrooms is a very common example because they love to look like things that will kill you. I have trained under Cherokee elders for herbalism. So a lot of the stuff I can tell you, but that doesn't mean I'm gonna go out and do it. Do we all know what poke salad is? Pokeweed. So you can use it to make ink. It used to be used to make ink. The berries can be fermented and made into ink. You can eat the young shoots. However, you have to blanch them about 8 times because otherwise, if you munch on them, they'll kill you. Because the plant is actually poisonous. But that's an old Southern staple, really. The whole plant is completely toxic, though. Otherwise, you have to eat it at a very certain stage. Milkweed is the same way. You can actually eat young milkweed shoots. You can eat hosta shoots. Hostas are not poisonous. You can eat hostas. You can eat daylily flowers. What my dad and I and my mom and I did forever growing up, and Carla knows this, we bred daylilies. So you can eat daylilies. You can kind of eat the roots. I don't suggest it. Dahlias were originally grown for their roots to be eaten. You can eat the tubers if you have the right ones. So this is like a dicot with a woody stem. So you have like a layer of cork, and then you have the actual vascular cambium. Most of this is meant to protect the inner stem, the xylem, the phloem, from bugs, from disease, from anything like that. Most of the time, you won't see any of this stuff on this microscopic of a level. So one of the great things is you will see it happening, but you may not see what's actually going on. So we do have some things that grow around here that have what we call exfoliating bark. As it grows, the old falls off. Crepe myrtles like this do this, sycamore trees do this, shagbark hickories do. We have some things that do this. It's really nice unless you have one of those neighbors that just complains that everything is on the ground. But I think it's pretty, and most people think it's pretty. But you can tell what's growing and what isn't because the older will fall off and be darker than what's growing. That's how, and when you save seed, what you pick may not be what it looks like later because it hasn't dried down yet. This one, to me, given its multiple trunks, it looks like a very, very old crepe myrtle. Is what it looks like to me. Sycamores do not grow like that. They have one trunk, usually.
Oh, I was thinking what part I know there are certain ones that are.
So with crepe myrtle and most of them you don't want to eat. You can technically eat oak bark, but it's very acidic. So you generally don't want to do that. Hickory bark and walnut poles and bark is used to treat internal parasites. They are very potent in what they do, but I generally don't tell people to go munching on bark because we have so many diseases and bugs here now that you don't know what mold you're biting into. So we don't want you growing 4 antlers the next day either. So it's always better to, and the big thing here, I don't go out and pick things to eat very often off the side of the road because you have no idea what was sprayed. That's the biggest concern. Roundup was originally used to demineralize spaceship boilers because my grandfather worked for NASA. That was what that stuff was originally used for. So you can imagine if it was used for that, how toxic it actually must be. So don't go munching on things unless you know for sure that it is clean. You can wash it off all you want to, but there was a study that was released here a month or so ago that I saw where they say even washing your vegetables is not enough to clean them. You are still eating Roundup and God knows what else. It's not enough because it's in the DNA of the plant at that point too. So be mindful of what you all want to grab off the side of the road. Now, do I go dig up plants? Yes, absolutely. All the time. Yes, ma'am.
That is horrifying and so sad about the whole Roundup being in the plant's DNA. That's terrifying.
It is, and that's the thing with a lot of these synthetic chemicals is that they become part of the plant because they were never meant to be used. I'm sorry, what was your question? Are they actually nutritious?
Yeah.
So most of the time, yes. The reality of the situation is the wheat, corn, soybeans we eat has no nutritional value at all. It's all been bred out because it is bred for productivity and not flavor, not nutrition. Why do you think you see on backs of bags of flour? Vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin B. They add it in because it's not in there anymore. I only grow heirloom plants and vegetables. They are where all the nutrition for humanity come from originally. So that's something else I try to make people aware of is that what we are eating today has no nutritional value, basically. It has to be re-added back to it because it's been taken out. Which is sad. Yes, ma'am. Mhm. If you are taking it and growing it yourself, it can be undone. It'll take, I mean, when you do that, it pretty much takes out any of the pesticide stuff because you're growing it yourself. It's only like if you eat that actual lemon or whatever you're using, like if you grow it yourself, it takes all that out.
So.
Mhm. It could be, I don't know how Tennessee does their organic. So she was asking if like you took a conventional lemon and say it had been sprayed with pesticide or something and you grow that seed out, would that be considered organic?
Because probably not. Because the plant is both of them.
That's what I was thinking. That's what I was thinking. The issue with organics. Yeah.
Probably GMO.
You're not gonna get the.
Yeah. Usually if you plant, like if you get a tomato from the store, a lemon, if you plant the seed from them, you're gonna get something else because they're hybrid. They're not true from seed. They will not come true from seed germ. You have to have an heirloom in order for that to happen.
So
Pretty much
what are you
everything we
gonna
eat.
get? I'm scared. Like, what are you gonna get?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
if I plant a tomato from the store, am I gonna get like a squash, like, or some mutant?
No, not like that, but I'm saying if you get a large red tomato and you plant the seed, you will probably get a cherry tomato because it's been crossed with that to make it productive.
Oh, gotcha.
That's what they do. They take cherry tomatoes and cross them to large tomatoes in order to get the productivity in. Then they taste like cardboard. Because most of your tomatoes are picked green, and so they can be shipped. And by the time they get to the store, they've ripened. Or they've sprayed God knows what kind of chemical on them, because that's how they also ripen fruit too.
What about the seeds you buy? I mean, they'll say non-GMO or organic, but I mean,
So organic is a term I don't even want to use anymore because in some states they have approved Roundup as organic. And I don't know how they have done this. Yes, yes. Monsanto made Agent Orange and now Bayer Pharmaceuticals
yeah.
owns Roundup. So your seed, you will have to somehow, and most of the time you're taking a company's word that it is truly non-GMO. I've been in the heirloom industry long enough, I can pretty much tell you if a company is reliable or not.
You have a list?
Yes, because I used to work for Baker Creek Heirloom Seed Company, which is one of the largest,
Yeah.
it's the largest. I used to work for them. Worked at Roughwood in Pennsylvania, and I know pretty much Hudson Valley Seed, Southern Seed Exposure. I know all the people that work. So I know more about them than they care for me to know, too, at the same time. But it's about really the small businesses is the ones you want to support, because they're the people that's not being paid under the table to sell GMO seed. If you all have seen in the store, like Annie's Organics.
Yep.
Monsanto owns them. They're a subsidiary. They are owned through, if you go up the chain far enough, you can find that they're not owned. They're organic, but it traces back to like Monsanto and all of them.
What is that about Johnny's seed up in Maine?
Right, to my knowledge, right now, they have not sold.
Okay, so-
They offer hybrid seed, but if it's conventional, that doesn't bother me. But it's when we get into GMO, they released a cabbage a number of years ago that was genetically modified with scorpion venom to keep cabbage worms out. And they said, oh, it's perfectly safe. I wouldn't eat it. There's no way. I can see, yeah. I'll send you a list, Carl, of the best seed, heirloom seed companies I've seen. Because I only buy from certain ones.
Yeah, I need that list too, because
Yeah,
this is
I'll send it to
crazy.
Carla, because Baker Creek is a can of worms too.
Awesome.
They have good stuff. I just don't approve of things they do. They released a purple tomato last year that was
Saw that.
non-GMO. It was stolen from Europe.
From Europe and then
Yeah, they sent someone over there. They got it, brought it back, renamed it. That's what they do. It was under a patent. It was copyrighted. There's a lawsuit pending for it. So, yes, ma'am.
What about like a standard of like a hybrid that hasn't necessarily been bred for production purposes? What do you think about that? Are we lacking nutrition?
It depends on what was used to breed it. Most of your F1s are bred for productivity. That's the primary purpose of them. If you can somehow find the heritage that they were bred with, you can then make your own choice of what you want to do. For me, I don't mind F1s, but you also have to understand that when an F1 is created, most of the varieties that's being used are ones that have been bred for just productivity. Sometimes you will find an F1 where they take like a Brandywine tomato and cross it to one of the newest ones that's on the market to make a new one. That's okay. But most of the stuff that we have bred today, and many of your F1s, to me, they're very bland because I've grown a lot of F1s. But I mean, it's gardener's choice. It's really what it comes to. Yes, ma'am.
So you don't have to say the names and everything, but like we have a lot of the Saturday marketplace.
Depends on where it comes from. Locally, I would assume it would probably be pretty good to eat, Perla, wouldn't it?
I mean, I would go to the market, and market here, because most of that, you think the homes for the local and they're not into the farmer system and on the big market. I don't think so. It just depends from farmer to farmer. Oh, it really does. And a lot of them.
Yeah.
Are, you know, some of them are USDA certified organic, some of them are naturally grown. Some of them use organic. You naturally grown, are USDA. Right.
Yeah.
All right, okay.
Yeah.
But meet your farmer, ask them if you can go visit their farm. Oh. Most of them down there will let you come out and visit the farm.
And if they don't buy it, because they're hiding something here. If they won't let you visit, don't buy it. Just don't buy it. That's a sign. That would just be a sign for me.
What do you mean by F1? What is F1? What do you?
So an F1 is the first generation after you've made a hybrid.
Okay,
You sometimes will hear F2, F3,
all right, that makes sense.
depending.
Consider a hybrid. Would it be a hybrid?
What do you mean?
So, biology, you know,
Mhm. To an extent, yes. I mean, the definition of a hybrid is anything crossed together. So a lot of plants we eat, they are hybrids because they were always crossed together. The hybrid that I am hesitant to eat is the ones more, I say modern, but what is modern? But like that is created by large companies, that is created in labs. Most of the stuff is done in a laboratory. It's not done in a field. When you get into gene splicing and everything, every time something is replaced inside those cells, it changes everything. It changes the plant's DNA, the molecular structure. It'll change what amino acids the plant has. This is why, if any of us are familiar with BT and corn, it will destroy your stomach. That's how it kills bugs, is it rips their stomach open literally. So they say that does not carry over in your seed. I don't believe it, because biologically, when you encode it within a plant, it would have to be in the seed somewhere for the plant to have it in its memory in order to produce it. So it's there. Whether or not it happens when you happen to eat it, that's a whole different story.
You mean Captain Jack's BT? Is that what you're talking about?
Now, actual BT, like you sprinkle on, that's okay. But it's a bacteria that's Bacillus thuringiensis is what it actually is. They have taken the DNA of that bacteria and inserted it into the molecular structure of corn. That's how they have GMO BT corn. It's not they sprinkle the powder, the genes are encoded within the plant. The plant produces the same BT proteins and everything that the bacteria do. They have edited the genetic structure of the plant. And you can do a lot of things now with CRISPR-9, one of the latest technologies in gene editing. They have it now where if you want to have a baby and you want them to have blonde hair, blue eyes, they can go in and edit the embryo. And you will have that. We have that technology. They are bringing back woolly mammoths in 2028. They are bringing back woolly mammoths in 2028. And the dodo bird. CRISPR-9. CRISPR-9.
I've done extensive research on that. That is my type of information.
There's also a new version of CRISPR-9 called Q4. I call that CRISPR-9 on steroids. That particular tool that can be used in genetic engineering is dangerous. Because it can do things that CRISPR-9 never even dreamed of.
Yep.
I can predict stories that can come out of that. My background is in plant breeding genetics, molecular biology, molecular genetics.
What your doctorate is in.
Yeah, that's what my doctorate's in. And it is mind-boggling, let alone
Scary.
a science fiction movie in the making. It is very dangerous. Especially these companies that all it is greed for money.
Yep.
And they will go to any length to create something for money.
Yeah. When we get through this, I have a story. So story time with Mr. Smith later. So if we have any other questions as I'm talking, stop me at the end. Did you have one?
I just had to clarify.
Okay. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
It's the first generation after that hybrid seed has been stabilized. which would
After
be
it's been made.
stabilized, Made.
Made.
See when the first go around.
Yes,
fourth,
the first time it's been grown.
Oh.
Since the cross was made.
Okay.
You will hear companies that say, this is a stabilized F1. That's not true. Normally, if you grow an F1, you still get segregation. You get what you want, then you get this weird thing over here and this weird thing over here. One parent look alike, other parent look alike, generally. That's usually.
That's usually what they'll have to do.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, F2 and F3. F3 is ideal, usually. Because they say in genetics that your hybrids are 50-50. That is not true. You can make the same cross one way and then do it the reverse, and you're going to get completely different results because it's all about how the DNA and the genes intermingle with one another. I'm doing an experiment this year in squash to prove that. So I'm hoping I can grow some stuff next year. But it's a slippery slope sometimes. Seed companies do a lot of propaganda, to say the least.
Well, I did notice that Baker's Creek there's a lot more advertising and they're doing YouTube, which they never did before. They just have their
Yeah.
heirloom exposition but they're doing a lot more.
They're trying to stay on the new trends too, in just not even in the seed industry, just online presence too. Because they were mail order for the longest time.
Right.
And I know Jared Gettle personally and his wife too. And I think they're running out of stuff to sell, honestly, because they have so much now and they've made a questionable reputation at times. So people don't want to give them as much as they used to. And a lot of these villages that they go to, sometimes those people are hesitant because Monsanto and them have already been there and stolen
Right.
everything.
Right.
Because with this CRISPR-9 and stuff, another thing really quickly you all have to understand, those genes can be copyrighted like a book. And if another company uses them, it's a lawsuit. So many seed companies have went under because they have stolen something from, say, Pioneer or one of them, used it in their own breeding, and they were not supposed to. Trademarks and copyrights and patents are a very slippery slope. That's the lawyer you want to be, you'll make millions defending that stuff. But they can copyright genes and DNA. Henrietta Lacks had cancer. She was an African-American woman. Some of us may have heard of her. They used her cells without ever asking her. And the family has been fighting it ever since. So that stuff happens all the time. They are taking heirloom varieties, extracting DNA and genes out of them and copywriting them and saying it's their own. And that's one of the biggest things that drives me up the wall, because I have a bunch of the indigenous seed varieties because we have Cherokee and Creek in our ancestry. I'm growing stuff for the Cherokee tribe next year, the Eastern Band.
Wow.
To help preserve stuff, what is left that hasn't been destroyed. Okay, so let me get through the rest of this. So grafting, this is also where we get into stems and everything. I mentioned this with that weird pear tree that we had up north. This affects tree fruit, a lot of ornamental plants you can graft, and you also can do it with some vegetables. A really cool experiment you all could do is get you a tomato or potato plant and graft a tomato on top. It will survive. They are the same genus, usually. I say that because they interchange solanums, which is what they both are. But you can have a tomato plant on top and you can have potatoes at the bottom, which is really cool. Now, a lot of the tomatoes that some of you or your neighbors or something may buy at the grocery store, they are generally grafted onto a specific rootstock that is nematode resistant, that is blight resistant, that is phytophthora resistant, or something like that. Sometimes with heirlooms, you want to do this if you want to save seed. It doesn't affect the seed. It just lets you grow the plants without having to worry about a blight infestation or a bug infestation or something. And that's the purpose of these rootstocks, is to make the plants vigorous and to grow more. So these are just some of the diseases: root knot nematode, southern blight, which is terrible here, Fusarium wilt, bacterial wilt, and verticillum. If we would have known about blights and everything back when the potato famine hit Ireland, we probably could have avoided a lot of that. Some of my family's ancestors came over because of that. I used to have the actual potatoes that were in the famine. They do still exist. They weren't completely wiped out, almost, but not completely. So we have 3 types of roots. You all may have heard these. This ought to be in your book somewhere. Tap roots, that's like a carrot. That's what a carrot is a tap root. It's a long, usually thick root that goes straight down. Trees have one. That's why if you try to yank a tree out, you usually fall backwards. Absorbs water deep in the ground. So again, carrots like pecan trees, pecans, sorry for those of you. Fibrous roots, they stay close to the topsoil, like in tomatoes and bedding plants. They get like surface water. And then your adventitious roots, they help a plant climb or anchor it. So Strawberries, you can sometimes see it in some grasses, corn has them, that's the roots that sometimes grow out of the stalk. Ivy has it, if you have ivy, it has those what look like little pads on it. Virginia creeper has the same thing, it sticks like a gecko and it just grows up. So taproot, fibrous root, and then adventitious root, or adventurous root is what I used to call them. So I'm gonna put the picture up here. So your primary root is the first one to grow. That is usually the longest one. So if you've seen seed germinate, that's the root that comes out first that goes into the ground. Your secondary roots branch off of that, and your root hairs are where your water is absorbed. Those are the little fuzzy things that's usually on the roots. Now your primary root has a root cap on it that protects it as it grows. It shifts and grows as the root does. Anybody writing this down? We're good. So just different types of root systems. Fibrous, you kind of have a taproot with that radish there. This is another aspect of the root. This shows you little hairs that kind of look like spaghetti. Then you have a root cap. Your roots, like we said, they kind of have like a meristem that grows. Some plants absolutely hate their roots being touched. Squash, especially poppies, they hate it. So you have to plant them where you want them, or otherwise they won't yell at you, I guess, but they won't be happy. So your root tips, they have a meristem. This is where the cells divide and elongate. This is how they grow. So roots have this vascular tissue. They uptake water. It's in the endodermis. The roots have kind of a different pattern to them because they are not at the top of the soil, usually. They are underneath. So they have more things to fight off. Bacteria, fungi, insects, worms, sometimes us. So root applications. Edible roots, transplanting, inoculation. That's when I was mentioning the legumes. You have to inoculate them with the specific bacteria. There is a company that sells it. I bought from them this year. Harris Seeds, I think they're up north. They have a good inoculation. Ideally, you should get an inoculation if you're going to use it that is for beans, peas, and everything, kind of, if you can find it. Otherwise, you have to buy them separate, and that can get tedious and expensive.
Excuse me, do you know if there's a difference in the inoculation between what they use for marijuana plants and what they use for, because they have a lot of that.
I would assume it could be some of the same things, but I would think it would be different because of the chemical compounds that marijuana plants produce. That THC and cannabinoids, that its natural purpose is to fend off from being eaten and from being bothered. So you have to find a bacteria that's not bothered by it, because it's probably more than likely also antimicrobial. Because that's marijuana's natural defense system. Hot peppers were never meant to be eaten. Somebody just decided, oh, this is hot, I love it. They were never meant to be eaten. They're hot because it's a defense mechanism. That's why marijuana doesn't usually smell very good. And that's also why we've tweaked it now, but the whole purpose of THC and everything in marijuana was to protect the plant. It was never meant to be used necessarily. All of this is really natural selection and evolution at its finest to protect the plants. Like poppies, if you all know what a breadseed poppy is, those are opium poppies. That's where opium comes from. That was never, it's a painkiller, but it protects the plant from being eaten or consumed. That's its intended purpose too. That's why a lot of plants are poisonous as well. So beets, I don't like beets. My dad is also allergic to beets, so we usually don't bother with them. This goes back to squash and pumpkins. Have I transplanted them? Yes. Has it taken them 3 months to actually look better? Yes. So I make mounds when I plant my squash. Usually, if you can find it, and I don't know. Mushroom compost is amazing.
Yeah.
That's the thing. I used it this year and I have squash and pumpkin vines about 50 foot long right now. I make giant mounds of it. I mix in some manure. It kind of looks like you have giant termite mounds on your property sometimes. But that's what I use for my squash. I dig a little hole in the center like a volcano, put 3 or 4 seed in, cover them up, water them. And then they're good to go for the most part. Squash do not like to be transplanted. You can actually transplant corn. I've done it multiple times, but generally you sow it in place too. It's just what the plant prefers.
Can I ask you what you use to avoid, keep the squash bug out?
So one of the best things to use, or to, I say use, you should be growing Cucurbita moscatus. Squash bugs don't like that species.
Say that again?
Cucurbita moscatus.
Okay.
Like butternuts. It's a species that's native to Central America that was brought up through the indigenous trade routes. Squash bugs, you will still get them, but they don't like them as much. Peppos are the ones that's always
Yeah,
bothered
if
by.
I put radishes around, I got squash bugs, pulled them, reseeded, and put radishes around it, and that one's perfectly fine. I
Yeah.
did find one today,
Yeah,
but
it's the radish, the scent, radishes have that scent to them. So you can use radishes, you can just plant the moscatas, or you can use marigolds. I love using marigolds.
I
But-
got marigolds everywhere, but that squash bug is.
Yeah, it depends on the type. Most of your dill,
Yeah.
I use.
Yeah.
Works really well.
Yeah.
Keeping them away.
and dill is delicious, especially for pickles. Now, you have some plants. I saw this on someone's binder earlier. I think there's a pink lady slipper on one of you all's
Yeah.
binder covers. So this is our native yellow lady slipper. We're supposed to have these. I've never seen one in the wild, but they're so pretty though. I love them. They have a very special relationship with fungi. Mycorrhiza is what it's called. They hate to be moved too because they have formed this relationship over millions of years with these fungi. That's why if you ever see wild orchids, you should never dig them up. If they are getting harder to find. You can also see the little trilliums in here. They have that kind of that same relationship, but you don't ever want to pick one because those are the only leaves it will ever have. It will die off and then it'll come back. And if you pick it, you'll kill it. It bothers me when the deer come through and munch off all my trilliums, but.
They grow wild in Maine,
Mhm,
and
mhm.
there are people that have them on their land. They used to be everywhere, all over
Yeah.
the roadside. I grew up in
Yeah.
Maine, and now
It's so sad.
these ones, they won't tell you. They keep it,
Keep it secret.
yeah, they keep it secret
Yeah,
because
because everybody wants to poach them. They want to dig
Yeah.
them up. It's
Yeah.
sad. It's very sad.
it
it's
takes
very
7
sad.
years for one to come back.
Yeah, they grow slowly. Most things that have that relationship are slow growing.
Yeah.
Okay, so are we doing a break, Carla?
Yeah.
Can we? Okay, if we want to do a break, we can do a break. Give you all some mental decompression. Give me a chance to drink something again. So I get. I just told them what I wanted to do. Adopted me, kind of, so I did special thing.
That's cool.
Yeah, so it's kind of a backstory. So, and a lot of that down where I learned it from. All the, I have Navajo, I have Cherokee, Creek, Choctaw, and then kind of do all native bringing it apart. So it's kind of what they do. Most of the they're finding a lot. And I don't know if there's anything there to see that's from years for them. They are really pretty good. So what I know is really from, a good resource would be to find. Find any of the verbal from the charity and the database. It's not calling it, because they wrote all this stuff down. There's a little called the charity. I would rely on stuff like that. You can still find.
It really works well. Yep.
That signboard that is made.
I cannot remember what it's called. Oh,
Weird and cool.
I know, my granddaughter was like. And so, fed it to the birds, and then, we sent her, putting on a phrase, I don't know part of it. But I moved it up, and I think.
I will, I have a book. I have a book called Complete Language of Flower. And it's a very old flower. It won't pull up.
One day, they're all going near instead of, when my senior.
And then the base of the stem,
Yeah.
all that part, I'll wrap it in, get dirty tape.
Really?
It helps wrap the bottom of the uniform. And I have four.
Really?
And the bottom, the serve it, goes on. Butter
Crazy.
but I've never.
Can you write that down?
Yeah.
Cause I put radishes around it.
I've never tried radishes, I don't like radishes, but
Well, they're just to keep the.
anyway.
Huge.
It's a really big one.
Here.
I don't think they got. It's a really.
Sorry, guys.
I tell us all my thoughts, come up there.
But my goes better.
If you have a.
Brian, not here.
No, no.
That entire pair. There.
That is a great.
I don't know.
Go for it, yeah, yeah.
I won't even touch them and be afraid of like. Yeah, he's great.
Yeah. Once again, you'll read it, yeah. DK,
Oh, they got your phone, right?
this is a really.
Put mine on. It was cheaper. Yeah. I got more than I could bring for me out of what he thinks. They ended up coming to spot. But got the tire.
Oh, I love them. But then I planted,
I think fire
and they're going out and they're really bucket feeding. Picking all the. You know, and you go, no, that one's open. Yeah, my neighbor, moved into a. Yeah. I didn't have But I don't understand.
And then you strain it into the pot. And it's like a white milk or a white liquid comes out. Yeah. And they keep the white liquid. And then maybe the cashew peanuts even. Don't get blended, strain it real well. And that liquid milk.
Yeah, yeah. And like we talked about. We have been, and we just haven't told anybody the real thing going on. That they're all. Yeah, solid, I think, right, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, no,
That's right. Get some barrels, put it in and let it grow.
there are some. Yeah, I'm here for that.
I am, yeah, definitely. Like, y'all do want our help, like, yeah, like that, stuff like that, but. We're going, this year, it's world. Oh,
Yeah.
well, and one will have to. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I need to, yeah, but then I'm.
That's how I heard it, yeah. Yeah. That's their big problem. I'm like, probably you can sit here and then find out who that's going to you'll be fine. I did it now, so you think. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's okay. It's okay. I was working for it. Usually when I get to the past few years, everybody is kind of like that, because it is a lot of information all at once, but a lot of them I don't think are open minded. Yeah, that's how I feel. I know this. But like Zippo, like I'm around this stuff every day, and some of you are on. And a lot of this, like, I just love it. Like, I told myself I want to be a teacher my senior year of high school. Then after I was talking to graduated, that would be a good thing to do. Then after I left that job, I come back, like, yeah, I do. Yeah. Yeah, herbal, the herbal medicine. I would say like it's still there. Yeah, Andrew. I don't know how to say it. Something. I know like an herbalist practitioner. He's from up north.
Yes. I heard 27 plans. And I had no water.
It depends on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What kind of? You know.
I mean, there are varieties now, just getting it, but your soil is behind out, that's what causes it, like,
Yeah.
You're still, where you plant it in this year. You know, it could just be the soil.
I did a lot of companion plants.
Yeah, that helps. That helps. And that's the thing, I'm not thinking of most of the miracles that we have, they have bread and have those people don't want to smell. I'm like, I know, I'm like, I know the ones I grow up in the middle of Mexico, they're the true, yes, they are the sweetest smelling miracles. They can figure it out. And when you look at the marketing, they say, no, see it. I'm like, like, they have a little tiny fire now.
So they're really.
They're from Central Mexico. They had that home. Ones I grow are the ones. I have the normal version and the. I will, I'm harvesting it now, so. I had a seed store last year.
Really?
But the way life is, the way it's like that. The ones in back of the year, very.
And I just said that now. But now.
The ones from Mexico, which they smell, that smell of the wood, so that,
Yeah.
that's why they were grown.
Right.
But they don't, some of them don't even look like modern American.
Oh my God.
But they're beautiful.
So different.
They're very pretty. This is an even rarer true yellow version of them, which is very hard to find. I got these, it's not even got a.
Really?
Originally. I grow Japanese watercolors, too, but most of them don't. Yeah. Yeah, and that's one I didn't, the watermelons are very, very notoriously upset by it.
Great.
They're very picky. Yeah, these are the other things. And I have, there's another flower, celosia coxcomb, that is also placed in the grave, so I have what I call the dead cat. So I have them in American. And the tomatoes I grew last year, they were the first tomatoes that were brought here. I have a tomato. It's in a herbal 1500s. I have the watermelon, gigantic. They're about yay big. They had no flavor. Got passing off something. Very candy. I have them. I think one good day. I don't know that I took a picture. They're red. It's red seeded too. The seed is red. You can eat the seed. Here, but I do.
Sugar baby one. Yeah, they didn't want to sell us the anything. I got.
Yeah, these are the only watermelons that I kept in the mail. Most of them I didn't.
I didn't. They didn't grow, they stopped growing, but they didn't take.
And, don't forget to leave your name tag so you can pick them up next week.
They're about the size of like a little cannonball. That's what they used to look like before they were gigantic, before they become gigantic. They have no flavor to them. They were candy before they become that. I mean, their seeds are flavor. They're very pretty. They're delicious. You can do them like pumpkin seeds, but. That's a good one. I don't know that anybody's ever done it. Like one of the pumpkins I grew last year, this is a Guatemalan Mayan heirloom. Green and orange. Very earthy, they taste delicious.
What's it called? Bottom or what?
It's called the green iota, which is green one. Baker Creek. You would have to find a bio. I don't think there's a home version yet. That's Baker Creek visit. They have, I don't remember what the last one is, but they can do a test. Mine out from the way. I don't know. All right, is everybody ready to pick back up? I'm gonna go ahead and start. I guess Carla disappeared. So we are gonna get back to discussing now leaves. Some of this is pretty arbitrary. We know leaves collect sunlight, they carry out photosynthesis, but they also help maintain water balance. So your leaf basics, you have an epidermis, which is like our skin. You have all these other fancy things, which I'm not going to get too much into. Your stoma is important because that's how your leaves and your plants breathe, is through those stoma. So why do we care about leaves? Edible leaves, obviously, if you eat kale. I mean, technically you can eat anything once. Sometimes twice if you're super lucky, but everything is edible once. You also have modified leaves. Plants have modified leaves and they help and they adapt to an environment. Kale, we all obviously know, most of us should know. for the longest time, I was a nerd for carnivorous plants. I still am. I just lacked the money being a teacher to really afford much of anything. So pitcher plants and most of your carnivorous plants, they're traps because they eat bugs. And sometimes if you're in the jungle, they eat rats. These are modified leaves. You all may have seen the ones they call monkey cup pitchers that they used to sell them around here. I haven't seen them in years, but they look like a little toilet, basically. Those are all modified leaves. The plants had to do that because where they grow is poor, boggy, wet soil that has low nutrition. So they found another way to feed themselves. So this is, again, another picture of stomata. Plants release water vapor, sometimes release water, and they can also kind of take it in. But this is why generally plants will stop transpiring, because they lose water. And when it's hot like this, they try to limit themselves from doing that because it is a loss of water. So now we have our plant mostly together. I will let my dad cover the nitrogen, NPK, and everything to overwhelm. So flowers, basic flower anatomy, or as I play with my kids, anatomy. Stigma, style, ovary. Your ovary is broken down into a placenta and ovules. Your pistil, which is the female part of your plant, is that stigma, style, and ovary. Your anthers and the filaments, they make up your male part, the stamen. Those are what the anther is, what produces the pollen. And then, like we saw on some of those other plants, they have sepals, and then sometimes you have petals. So those are your four parts. This is what we call a complete flower. Most everything is kind of out. You can see the sepals, which are green. You can see the actual petals. You can see the pistil, the stamen, and the anthers as well. This is from a apple tree. Squash are what we call incomplete. They're monoecious. So if you all have ever grown squash, you know they have a male and a female flower. Now your plants will produce both, but you will not get squash unless you have female flowers. Male flowers cannot produce squash yet, I guess. The one on the left is a female flower because you can see the pistil. The one on the right is your male flower because you can see the stamen, which is kind of like a tube that has pollen on it. If you have a native population of bees, if you wake up about 7, 8 in the morning, your flowers will be filled with the little bees that have striped butts, and their butts will be facing you because they sit inside of these flowers after they pollinate them. These bees followed squash up as it moved through the Americas because it was domesticated twice, here in North America and in Mexico. Sunflowers were the same way. Squash is one of the oldest plants in the Americas. It was domesticated long before corn and beans ever were thought to have been. So you also have dioecious. This is a holly flower. These are the plants that have male and female flowers on separate plants. So in order to get holly berries, if you've ever want such a thing, you have to have a male and a female tree. We have both on our property. I love the red berries until they end up on everything because of the birds. So some plants are dioecious. Most of the time you find them where they're on the same plant. Yes, ma'am.
They're like that, right?
Yes, persimmons are like that too.
So, the male tree and the female.
That's the,
And I don't know.
you have to wait till one fruits. That would probably be the only way. Genetically, I'm sure there's a way to do it, but otherwise you're not going to be able to tell. If it fruits, it's a female. Otherwise, if it just makes flowers, it's the male because that's a pollinator.
And do they have to be close to each other, or it doesn't matter? They're obviously on the property.
In the vicinity of one another, like the bugs and bees, they will travel. So, persimmons, most of you all probably know they're a great way to tell what our winter is going to be like. I don't ever get persimmons because we have them wild too, but, the turkeys and everything, they munch them before I can even get them. But persimmons, they are like that. Well, they're close to each other. You should be okay. It's not like you have one on one side of town and one on the other side of town. So, yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, you have to wait. That's the thing with dioecious plants. Genetically, you can go in and look, but it's like a ginkgo tree. You do not want a female ginkgo tree. The fruits stink to high heaven. I love ginkgo trees because they're ancient. They're one of the oldest surviving trees we have. And I have a whole flat of young ones I've grown from seed. I have no idea what gender they are until they decide to bloom. And I'll be long dead probably before they ever decide to. So I'm just gonna hope and pray that the ones I put in the ground are males. So monocots and dicots, your monocots have floral parts in groups of 3, like we said, and your dicots are in groups of 4 or 5. So you can kind of look at a plant and tell what they have. Some plants, if they're really tiny, you're going to have a problem seeing. It just depends. Your dogwood is a dicot. It has 4 floral parts in it. I'm tired. My speech is slurring. So this is the close-up of an actual dogwood flower. So the petals or the bracts that we think is petals, they are not the real thing. These are the actual flowers in the center. These are what gets pollinated. I have grown dogwoods from seed this year. It's very fun, very slow, but very fun. So you have a monocot here with this daffodil or buttercup, as I've always called them. So monocot groups of 3, you have your stigmas and your fused petals together. We've had daffodils forever. They were brought over with the early colonists because they grow wild in Europe. Now they grow wild here, but. So I'm gonna hope that we kind of have an understanding of how seed is actually created in a plant. Your pollen grain germinates as it goes down the pistil, down the pollen tube, and it reaches the ovules. That is how a seed is formed. This is a very fancy picture, but
8th grade science.
8th grade science for the most part. So you do get things like this seedless cucumber. You sometimes see seedless watermelons, which is what we call parthenocarpic. So they can produce fruit without pollination and fertilization. These are weird. You don't see these very much. They are purposefully bred for this because you don't have to have a pollinator, and you can produce these without having to add like bees or something in your greenhouse or your garden. Most of our pollination is done by our bees. These pictures here, these are native carpenter bees. We have quite a few species of bumblebee. In fact, one of them is a carpenter bee. They're the ones I call wood bees. They bore holes in your wood and you kind of poke at them and they don't sting you, but they get mad. They are pollinators, do not kill them. Blueberries are primarily pollinated by bumblebees. We have a lot of species of bumblebees here in Tennessee. Most people don't know that. Fun fact, most of your okras, if you grow morning glories like I do, your okras, your hibiscus, your melons, they're pollinated by little tiny carpenter or very tiny bumblebees. That's what primarily pollinates them. That giant bee is on a passion flower, which is our Tennessee wildflower. Yes, ma'am. You can ask. You can ask him. You can get, I think they do have like sprays and stuff now. They make, what are they called? They're called bee houses, and you can get little houses and little huts specifically for bees. And that way you are guiding them toward those and not like your house or your shed or something. We just kind of let them do what they want to do, because unless you have like a gigantic population of them, I have seen more this year than I've seen the last few years of them, but they're generally not a problem. They only lay like 1 or 2 eggs and one will hatch and everything, but you can also just plug the holes up if you want to. That'll deter them. You can use like steel wool or something. We just let them do what they want to do, because my honest opinion, we are in their way. They generally live in trees out in the forest that have died, but because we humans have taken over everything, that's just what they're doing. So that's kind of how I see it too. But most people I've talked to, they just plug the holes with something, because that deters them. They get mad and they leave. So, or you get those little bee houses. They're cute. I have a couple. So cross-pollination. Yes, sir.
So this year I harvested some leaf cutter beans.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know if that would be beneficial to bring in not native bees into the garden, like solitary, like mason bees in the spring, leaf cutters for the summertime. But this is the first year, so I know it did invite some moths, but that's
Yeah.
problem
Yeah.
with that.
So just be careful if you are bringing in foreign, and that can mean a bee from another state that's not native here. Yeah, just be careful. Generally, they won't overpopulate because we have wasps, native wasps, that attack and eat carpenter bees, that attack and eat most native bees. It's just nature's way of controlling the population. So just be careful with it. You can do a lot of reading and everything, but we have native leafcutter bees here. They're hard to find because of pesticides and everything. But I would say just be mindful of what you're doing. Because a lot of things have been brought here and they've escaped, but we are a lot better than we are today. And generally, if they're a problem, they can't be imported. That's the other thing. Because a lot of import laws affect seeds and bugs and insects too. Like I've always wanted a colony of leafcutter ants because they have a fungus that feeds them. You can't import them because they can be destructive. But most of your leafcutter bees, it's native here. If you look on your rose bushes, if you have any, they love cutting out rose leaves. So just kind of be mindful of what you're doing. I don't think it would be a problem, but just kind of check on the species and everything. If they're one that won't overwinter, you're probably okay. Yeah. Because most things.
Reeds and then nectar from that, you have to harvest them.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I don't think that would be a problem. I wouldn't see that being a problem because they're a niche species and I don't know, they'd have to like mutate or something, I would think, to probably become a problem. But those little huts are good for mason bees too. They love living in them. Squash bees live in the ground, so they have to have bare soil usually to live in. They usually nest around the pumpkin patches usually because that's where they live. So cross-pollination is a problem. Now, there is a point in time where I was growing 300 varieties of corn every year because probably about 20,000 different varieties exist, heirlooms alone. I had most of them. At one point, I had the largest collection of heirloom corn in North America. That is no longer the case because moving, mice, weevils, a bunch of other things. Cross-pollination in corn and other plants is important, and it's important to understand how things pollinate. And with like apples and peaches, do you need a pollinator or not? I'm not going to go through this game with you all. We're adults, hopefully. Now with corn, it is one of these things where if it cross-pollinates, you will be able to tell because it will show up in the kernels. Beans can be like this, but corn is the best example. With things like tomatoes and squash, you won't know if they've crossed until you grow them the next year. That's the problem. That's why I hand pollinate to eliminate any suspicion. I grow wild squash too, so they're very bitter. So you have to be careful when they cross. You all have probably seen beans if you've ever grown them. I love watching beans grow. I grow mine up my corn usually. So plants in the environment. This has more than likely changed because every year we seem to be getting warmer. And then we get that weird time in January or February where it is like -4 here. And I'm like, oh my God, everything's gonna die, including me. So knowing what zone we're in, we are a 7B now, I believe, if they haven't changed it. I think we're like a 7B now, which is why your dahlias will come back, your cannas will come back, your elephant ears will come back, your caladiums may even come back, your gladiolas will probably come back. I have a lot of stuff that's come back that I never have ever had survived before. I had last year, this year, I had a type of okra that came back from the roots because it was hardier than I expected it was. Beautiful flowers and everything. So we are getting warmer. As a science teacher, you all can imagine how I feel about what's going on to our climate. Every plant has a specific requirement though. They all need light, water, air, obviously, but what they get and where they're grown is what affects this. So this is something that I would write down, maybe not the examples unless you want them. Long days and short days. When I was here at Austin Peay, my area of expertise was photoperiodic corn and beans. I don't think I have the pictures in this presentation, but some of the corn I grow from South and Central America, I had 30-foot corn stalks. I wish I was joking, but I had 30-foot corn stalks because where they grow near the equator, they get shorter day lengths, and that triggers them to tassel, to flower, and to silk. This is how plants we grow here. That's what tells them. The day length that they read from the leaves is what triggers the hormones and everything in the plant to tell them, oh, hey, I should be blooming right now. If you grow cowpeas, black-eyed peas, sometimes you will get an early set and then they stop. That can also be because of heat. But right about now, mine are starting to grow again and starting to flower again because they're reading the day length. They should be day length neutral, meaning it doesn't matter when you plant them, but that can change according to climate and everything too. So your long day plants are the ones that need short light to trigger flowering. Your short days, they need long nights, so more darkness or less darkness in order to trigger their flowering. Most of the plants and everything we grow, short days, are day length neutral, it doesn't matter. But you do run into stuff like this sometimes. This is why people have to grow poinsettias and chrysanthemums, usually in a greenhouse, in order to trigger their flower. Photoperiodic is a very interesting concept. The beans from South America I've grown, the green beans and lima beans, butter beans. One year I grew some, they were black and white, they looked like a cow, a Holstein cow. I had 70-foot vines. Way longer than I anticipated. And that was a interesting fence covering for the year. In most parts of South America, the lima beans and green beans, they come back from the root because the climate is so mild. But we don't have that luxury here. Your hardiness is also a thing. Hardiness factors include moisture, how hardened off the plant is, and what plant part, generally the roots. But if you have like a shrub, it depends on that too. Don't plant a palm tree here and expect it to live because it's going to die. Now, in another 100 years, maybe not, but in 300 million years, Pangea is going to reform. So I don't know where I'll be. According to my students, I made the universe. They think I'm that old. So whatever they want to think. But please try to understand stuff. Your animals will not survive the winter, usually. Chilling hours are also important. This is when I was talking about like brassicas, like your cabbage and everything. How much cold they get is these chilling hours is what will make them flower. Now with like peaches and apples, they have to have this in order to flower and set fruit. We have an orchard, apples and peaches. And every year, we always meet the chilling hours. However, in like late April, we get that one freeze and there goes our peach crop and apple crop. We had some this year, but it wasn't as many as I had hoped. So most of your peaches, this is like with blueberries, you need about 300 hours. Some varieties require more or less. This is stuff that you can always look up online now. But your chilling hours, they vary. And you can pull up a calculator online. Carla probably has access to this one. But you can just probably Google chill hours calculator if you really want to know. Now, we get into what I call the headache of classification. I tell people if I was a plant taxonomist, I would be hitting no, 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 and every time they want to reclassify something, because that's all they want to do. Technically, asparagus is related to lilies, technically, but they keep changing everything. So there used to be this song in school that we learned that I'm not singing because that's not what I do for a living. Kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. At the top is less broad, at the bottom is more, or top is broad, bottom is more specific. We care about the bottom more than we do the top. We know what is a plant, what isn't, usually. So, like in this case with a cat, you have kingdom down. What we in botany and everything are more concerned with is usually the family, genus, and species. In this case, Felis, Caddis, we were not very clever when we named anything. Now, with plants, so this is for a hydrangea. All of this determines what they fall into. Unless anybody in here wants to be a plant taxonomist, you and I are going to get into a tussle later on probably. Again, we are more concerned with family, genus, and species. So in this case, hydrangeas are in the order that roses belong to. Magnoliophyta and everything, guess what that determines? Flowering plants. Genus is hydrangea. Ale, or any name after the plant, the genus or the species, is who named it. Carl von Linnaeus was brilliant. He published in 1753 Species Plantarum. He named humanity. He named pretty much most plants and animals on Earth. He didn't name all of them, but he is the guy that named pretty much almost all of them. Ale is his abbreviation that means Linnaeus. Yeah, I'm probably in the way. I feel like I'm always in the way. But Linnaeus is the guy that created what we know as binomial nomenclature. We name plants with a genus and a species. I'm hoping that I have this in here. Maybe I don't. Because the problem is, before Linnaeus, and if the slide is in here, it is. If it ain't, it ain't. You had roses, a rose that had like Rosa, blah, 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 blah. Like it literally had 9 parts to it. I've seen it before because it's before Linnaeus's time. The reason we care about Latin names, the genus and species is in Latin. Latin is generally a dead language, except when you get into biology and everything, because a lot of the prefixes, suffixes are Latin, and the genus and species are. So do I speak Latin? Not necessarily. But I cannot do this enough. Carla has had me give seed saving things. So if you all ever want one, please tell Carla. I have like 4 presentations. I ran a seed company for a while. I actually had a seed store that may or may not come back into existence. We have to know Latin names in order to know exactly what we're dealing with. Because guess what? If somebody says squash, what do you mean cucurbita pepo, muscata, argosperma? What are we talking about? Squash is very generic. Hibiscus is another term that's very generic. We have to be able to know what we're getting. Also, disease and pest susceptibility, because peppers, tobacco, tomatoes, most of your nightshades like that, they all can be affected by the same pathogens because they're all related. Potatoes too, because they're in the same family. So when we are looking at this, we're almost done. There's 7 slides left. So when you're doing it is what's called a dichotomous key. I have one at home for most Tennessee flora that's like that big. Do I ever use it? Not generally. Because I have other books with pictures and I can look at something and usually know what it is, not always, but when you're trying to identify a plant, you may get someone, a neighbor, a friend, a family member, some random person off the internet. I don't know. I get that all the time. What's this plant? What is it? I want it. Do you have it? That's what I get all the time. But what you need to know, is it a monocot? Is it a dicot? You use the leaves, you can look at the leaves. How are the leaves arranged? We've all seen this. You may just not exactly know what it is. So some plants, the leaves are arranged opposite on the stem. Some they form little like roses at the bottom of the ground. Sometimes you have alternating leaves. Sometimes you have whorled leaves. Simple leaves, palmate leaves, looks like a hand, which is like Virginia creeper. Pennant leaves, they are like your ash trees and pecan, tomato, you know. What is the leaf shape? I'm not going to go into this because this is even half of what actually is out there in leaf shape. We'd have to have this entire wall filled with what is in the botany world now. You will generally see linear, elliptic, and lanceolate, and ovate for the most part. Not very many plants have cordate, heart-shaped leaves. Redbuds do. Cottonwoods do. Lindens do. So leaf margins, this is the same way. Basically, do they have teeth or not? This is the simple way I describe this. This is really important if you're trying to identify trees. Oak trees, we have a ton of them in Tennessee, and they also love to cross with each other. So you get populations that share the characteristics between one species and another. They're probably a natural hybrid population. That happens all the time. You have other leaf features, like what does it look like when they connect to the stem? What are the tips like? How are the veins arranged? Then you have the flowers and roots that we covered. Is it fibrous? How many flower parts does it have? What is the flower structure? If you're looking at actual botanical guides, you will see this fancy terminology. Umbels, you can think of like Queen Anne's lace, carrots. Some of these others, you kind of see the pinnacles, it's like goldenrod, which is getting ready to bloom. Spikes and racemes, it's most of your flowering plants. You can break this down for 40 different times. This is the fancy terminology for how plants respond to the environment. So gravitropism is gravity, phototropism, sunlight, hydrotropism, water, thigmotropism, touch. Yes, some plants you touch, their leaves will photo or curl, depending. And chemotropism, responding to chemicals. Mainly when we spray chemicals, our main goal is to kill it, generally. Sometimes it is to help the plant, but do we have any questions? I know that was a lot. Any questions at all? Anything? I hope our Zoom peeps are still on here. They've been quiet. So I guess no questions are good questions. I mean, I can look at the chat, I guess.
What did
So
persimmons tell
Yeah,
you?
I have
winter's
questions.
gonna be like?
Oops, sorry.
So if you cut open a persimmon, you have to cut the persimmon open and you have to cut
I
the
don't know how to
seed.
read that.
Uh-huh.
It will either show a fork, spoon, or knife. A fork and spoon, you're gonna mean you're gonna dig yourself out, so a lot of snow, and a knife is generally not as much. Woolly bear caterpillars that we have here, their coloring can also tell you. They're solid black or have a lot of black color on them. That generally means that it's gonna be a bad winter. I saw one yesterday morning that was solid black. So that's not always the case, but that's one of the old folk traditions that we have. So somebody had a Zoom question, I heard.
Yeah, yes. So I wrote a question about the seeds and non-GMO seeds. And I was asking if the seeds that I have were, okay. And they're the Livingston brand non-GMO.
So yeah, Livingston is pretty good. Livingston has not been bought out yet by big corporations. Burpee is not what they used to be. Actual Burpee, when he was still alive, did a very good job. They are generally okay. I buy from Livingston every year because I love their flowers. Their seed is usually good quality.
Nice.
In here, Felicia mentioned Seed Savers Exchange. I know their president and I know their seed manager as well. They are the ones I've actually partnered with. They are a nonprofit based in Iowa. They do
Okay.
sell seed. They are one of the top heirloom seed sources I would recommend. Seed Savers Exchange.
Oh, nice. One
They are
last
the ones
question.
I am working with to grow for the Cherokee.
Okay. And one last question.
Yes, ma'am.
The purple carrots, are those more nutritious than the orange carrots?
Yes. Orange and red carrots naturally have beta carotene in them, but the purple ones have anthocyanins, and that's good for boosting your immune system.
Okay. And then could I order these types of carrots online?
Yes. Baker Creek has a bunch. A lot of seed companies do.
Okay.
Seed Savers Exchange offers some. What is the other company? Fedco is pretty good. Territorial Seeds is also pretty good. I'm going to send Carla a list of heirloom companies that I support.
Okay.
So I'll try to note that on there if I can. But
Okay.
you have to be mindful who you buy from because anybody can say non-GMO and organic. That's the problem.
Yeah.
And they don't always mean it.
What about high mower?
High mowing is really good too. They have like conventionally bred hides. So they do it, the breeding is done by hand, it's not genetic or anything. And I don't have anything against conventional breeding because we've done that for thousands of years. But it's when you start getting into some of the F1s, I know someone mentioned that earlier, some of the F1s are GMO bred, they just don't tell you them. Because
That about M.I. Gardner. He's real small. He's a-
there's been some issues with
Yeah,
mainly quality of seed. It's not necessarily GMO, but quality for them has been a problem. Sometimes you will see sandhill preservation. They're out west too. Their stuff is very crisscrossed. It's not pure. For me as an heirloom seed saver and seed keeper, I want purity over anything. So if the variety is not pure, I won't grow. Now, if I'm making a cross, because I do breed, I still breed a lot of things. That doesn't bother me, but as an heirloom seed saver, my number one priority is purity of the variety. Because if those genetics are ever lost, that variety will go extinct.
right.
I have a lot of varieties that no one else in the world has. I'm the last person that grows a lot of this stuff. So they are my priority.
man.
To die. There we are. And we have lost, I believe it's in the presentation I gave on seed saving. We have lost about 90% of heirloom vegetables over the last 100 years.
Wow.
Wow.
There used to be dozens of heirloom cabbages, of carrots and everything, and now we're down to maybe 20, if that.
Wow.
It's very sad. It's very concerning too, because hybrids and GMOs have replaced much of everything.
Right.
And most of your big corporations like Bayer, they are buying out heirloom seed companies. So that competition for them doesn't exist.
And
Because
doesn't
they
Red
want
Rock
the farmer
own
to
them?
have to buy the seed from them every year. That's the whole point of hybrids.
Wow.
Yeah, they want the money. They don't care about anything else or what they're doing. So, but that's the goal of most bigger companies and bigger corporations. If I start my seed store back up, the Divine Botanist is what it's called. I will include that to you. I haven't renewed it because the seasons we had last year and even this year, I don't have the seed quantities to really sell. But I have seed of some stuff, like you were asking me about the marigolds, the ones I have, the ones from Day of the Dead, the real marigolds used from Day of the Dead. Like we were talking, I have watermelons from the 1500s.
That's amazing.
Yes, they were brought in from Africa. They're native to Africa.
That is amazing.
They're about yay big. They're not, they were selected to be huge. True original watermelons were this big. The seed was eaten, the fruit was not. The fruit was candied. The one I have is red seeded. It's bright red seed. It's beautiful. It's called the Pastel Confiture.
So what do you do with this something going? You do it for your
Yeah,
family?
we eat it. We eat it ourselves, and I also grow it to preserve it. Like I have a partnership with Seed Savers Exchange. I renew the seed for them. And if it's any of the indigenous stuff I grow it and send it back to the tribe that it comes from. When Standing Rock happened, if any of you know what Standing Rock was, when the Sioux was trying to fight for their land and everything, I had their corn, their indigenous corn. They thought it went extinct centuries ago. I had it in my collection because somebody sent it to me, and I sent them a whole bunch to put back. Linda Black Elk, I know. So a lot of this stuff I grow and send back to the people it came from. I don't own it. I just steward. The people that it came from is where it originally belongs to. I have cotton from Louisiana that's red. African Americans were not allowed to grow, slaves were not allowed to grow white cotton. White cotton was for white men only. They could only grow colored cotton. Green cotton exists, brown cotton exists. Southern Seed Exposure is a good company to buy it from. The red cotton, I'm the only person that has it because it was passed down to me from a African American guy in Louisiana. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff that's out there that nobody knows about. I grow it because
I'm so excited to go seed shopping now. Oh my
not really. I mean, I grow a little bit on, how many acres do we have? About 10 acres. It's not a lot. I mean, it sounds like a lot, but I just stagger what I grow. Like my fences this year are covered in Japanese morning glories and cowpeas and beans. I have beans from the Great Smoky. Everything's almost dead now, but maybe next year we can arrange that. I can get with Carla if we want to do that. Field trip or something. Like if you ever want me to do another seed saving one, I can do that. We are having
yes, field trip.
field trip. So in December, Austin P is hosting the Tennessee Food Summit. I was asked to speak at it. I will be speaking on seed saving and creating your own seed library. I plan on bringing in all the stuff I'm harvesting right now. I showed them up here. I have a pumpkin that is green inside. The flesh is green. It's not orange. It is super nutritious. It is grown by the Mayans in Central America and Mexico. So I will be doing that. That's December 6th to the 8th. I don't know the exact date because they're still working that out, but I will be there speaking on seed saving if any of you want to come. The Tennessee Food Summit.
What month would you like fresh garden to go up and give
It probably, if we can find a cooler day in August next year, that's when harvest will start. So somewhere around then. I am reshaping. I say I'm reshaping our land. I'm having to reconfigure how we're doing stuff because I've got to grow a large quantity of Cherokee varieties to send back to them. So I'm having to alter what I grow. Because I mix what I can grow next to each other that won't intercross. I do that. Yes, ma'am. Yes, I was gonna say yes. I will let you know because our weather, as I said earlier, is very bipolar, and I like the heat, but I don't either. If I can be inside when it's cool, that's where I prefer to be. But I will let you all know when it's best. Because sometimes it depends on the year we've had. Like this year, I have a lot of like my cotton as tall as me. The red cotton I was talking about, I grew it this year to grow it again. And cowpeas have done really well. My corn is pretty much cooked, quite literally. and my tomato crop was wiped out. Sadly, I have a tomato that was taken on the Underground Railroad. I also have I was telling them I have the first tomato that was ever taken to Europe from the Americas. I recently reacquired one of the first peppers ever taken to Europe. And I have so much rare stuff. I tell people I don't grow anything common because I don't have time for it. I'm more worried about things that will be lost than I am the stuff that's in circulation already.
Right.
Cherokee purple tomatoes never belonged to the Cherokee. That is a story that was created. A lot of things in the seed world, you have to look and trace where it comes from because propaganda is how you sell it that matters.
Yeah.
The original Brandywine tomato came from up north. You will find it plastered everywhere, but I also have the tomato. If anyone knows who the Hatfields and McCoys were, the families that fought, I have the tomato from that family. My Cherokee friend obtained it from that family. So I have so much stuff. It's ridiculous what I grow.
Are we able to try some rare seeds because it's like tasting history?
It is tasting history. I am planning to send Carla. I was operating a little mini seed store. Teacher, I'm poor. And I also want to get these varieties I have out there. So I don't know if it'll be next year that will restart up. I may have to wait until like 2026, depending on everything. I need to grow stuff is also what I need, but I plan on trying to get some of this stuff out there if I can. I can send Carla. It'll be in the Tennessee Food Summit, my Facebook. I post almost everything to Facebook. Most of my students are like, ew, you use Facebook. That's ancient. I'm like, well, that was my generation. So, and it's where most of my seed people are, what I call my seed people. That's where they are. We all stay connected on there or Instagram. That's where I post all this stuff because I also grow a lot of rare flowers too because I've always loved flowers. But I'm going to try to get my seed store restarted in the next year or two. That's my goal. It was going to be this year, but all my tomatoes rotted or got blight. I had tomato hornworms galore this year. I also have one of the tomatoes, very great name called Large Red. It is the oldest tomato grown here in the South. It predates the Civil War. I also have it too. So
They have Tomato Mania sales, like events are here in Tennessee.
there's one in Nashville. They just had it, I think, a week or two ago, I think. I don't know exactly what they do at it, but
They sell the plants.
they probably sell the plants,
Different
but
plants.
they used to have a tomato stomping festival, which was interesting.
Right.
But it depends. Like tomatoes, one of the easy things to grow because you can take cuttings and root them and grow more. That's what I usually do each year. But there's a lot of stuff out there, but some of it is not for sale because it's so rare. But Southern Seed Exposure, they have a bunch of Southern varieties, and that's what I would suggest for people to buy. Don't buy stuff from up north because it will hate it here. Generally don't grow things from up north and from the Southwest. Now if we're hot and dry like we are now, you can grow some of that stuff, like the watermelons from the Hopi and Navajo. Some of their beans and stuff, they will like it here, but generally Southwestern seeds don't like our humidity. That's the downside to that.
Do you know, like the Amish? I got all my plants starters from the Amish this year, and they did fabulous.
Most of the time, the Amish grow heirlooms. A lot of them have their own seed that's been passed through the families. Now, a lot of the Amish up where we are and where I teach at, they have adopted hybrids and GMOs. So I would say ask them, but they're not going to tell you the truth unless you speak Pennsylvania Dutch. That's their native tongue. It's Pennsylvania Dutch.
Yeah.
When I lived up north, the guy that founded Roughwood, he spoke German and Pennsylvania Dutch and Polish. So they would start talking about him and I when we were there, and then he'd go and start and say something to them in Pennsylvania Dutch, they'd shut up because they didn't think that he knew the language. Some of the Amish are like that. A lot of the indigenous communities, they will not talk to us white people because of what has happened to them for so long. Our great our great grandmother walked the Trail of Tears. She was full-blooded Cherokee. So I have a very big heart for Cherokee seeds and indigenous things in general, obviously, but we also have a corn that's been in our family for 120 years. That was passed down on my dad's side from family that got it from one of the big world fairs that was in 1893. So seed is in my blood, quite literally, but it was in all of our blood at one point.
Yeah.
Because that's what we humans did. We saved seed for thousands of years, and now we are just throwing it aside like it doesn't matter. It's one thing I'm trying to get my students to understand is that if we lose this biodiversity, we're done for. Because these heirlooms are our backup. They can adapt, and that's the other thing that I didn't say. Your hybrids and your GMOs, they do not genetically have the capability to adapt to conditions. They are bred to grow, usually in a certain area or just in general. And so if we get a drought, you'll see a lot of corn just die because it cannot genetically adapt itself. Heirlooms have that capability because their DNA is ever changing. You can plant something one year, and every time you plant a seed, it is adapting every year. So it may look a little bit different each year, but hybrids and stuff, you can't really buy fruits from the grocery store and plant them and expect them to come true because they won't. They're hybrids generally. You'll get, like I said, you'll get some weird thing usually each year. People freak out when they plant like I was saying, one of the big red tomatoes in the store, which is grown in a greenhouse. You get a cherry tomato because that's what was crossed to produce the productivity within that tomato. At one point, they were trying to genetically engineer corn by putting jellyfish DNA into it so it could withstand the cold. I have corn grown from Bolivia and Peru, grown at 12,000 feet above sea level, that freezes and frost don't kill it. So why are we trying to take animals and put them in plants? Money, that's what it comes down to. Corruption. The people I used to work for in Pennsylvania, they knew somebody that used to work for Monsanto, and the guy was actually he was being poisoned by former people and lawyers and everything from the company because he was telling their secrets. When you leave a company like that, you're sworn to secrecy because of the things they're doing behind closed doors. In Fort Detrick, Maryland, up north, there is a unit that has every single pestilence that man has ever faced. They have it in cold storage. In the event we would need it for something, for research. They have smallpox, they have coronavirus, they have monkeypox, they have tuberculosis, they have bubonic plague, they have everything. Everything you can imagine that humanity has faced over the course of its time that we know still exists or that we dug up, they have. So it's terrifying, and our glaciers are melting, the ice caps are melting. God knows what's going to be thawed. That's one thing that I talk to my kids about all the time is we don't know what existed back then completely because it's been so long. Like they resurrected a flower that was 30,000 years old because they found a stash in the permafrost that thawed where a squirrel had buried it. They had buried the seed in the permafrost and they found it and it germinated. You can freeze seed. My dad and I have corn seed and stuff in the freezer that's been in there for 40 something years. And it germinates fine. You freeze it, it kills the bugs, it kills the pathogens that's in it, but it also makes the seed go to sleep. It stays dormant and you can plant it. That's how I store my seed that I grow. I dry it, put it in the freezer. We had about 10, but when we had that tornado and everything last winter, which is also not normal for us, it knocked our power out and we lost about 5 or 6. So I lost a bunch of stuff last year because of the weather here and because of the power. I lost stuff that was irreplaceable. That's now extinct because we didn't have a generator at the time yet either. But yeah, that stuff like that happens. Like some of the people I've acquired their seed collections from, they gave it to me because their freezer went out or how they were storing it. One of the people, he was 90 when I visited him in 2015, 2016 in Louisiana. He passed away a couple years ago. I have a bunch of his seed. His family, his brother and sister went into his house and threw everything out. All the seeds that I didn't even get to see, and that God knows what he actually had. Just thrown away. Because they didn't care. They didn't want it. And it's mostly young people like me that's very rare to find that actually cares about what we still have. I'm very fortunate because my dad and my mom worked for Cargill when they had their seed research division. The salt that goes on our highways and the turkeys that we eat during Thanksgiving come from Cargill. They did away with their seed research division years ago. But anyway, so that's it. I will send Carla whatever. Hopefully you all were too over.
Thank you.
We'll save that for another time then. All right. Okay, thank you, Steve. I appreciate it very much. All right.
Thank you.
Well, we will see you all next Tuesday for soils class then. Thank you all.
Thanks, Carla.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.